When Ilya was 5, he had a sweet dream. In the dream, his mom smiled and walked toward him from the dark, gently squatting to pull him into a hug and kiss. Then she tenderly took his hand to the living room, knelt, and began to pray softly. Just then, he thought he heard a call and snapped his head toward the door. To his surprise, he saw another him staring at them with envy. The boy woke with a smile, his first sight the flowers swaying on the windowsill in the breeze. Everything was perfect, but his mom was nowhere in sight. Ilya panicked, barefoot, and rushed into the living room, searching every inch for his mom, under the table, behind the curtains, out in the yard. He searched every corner of the manor and asked everyone he crossed paths with, but he never saw the one he loved so deeply. His father leaned on the windowsill, his sad eyes making Ilya even more anxious. He ran wild across the fields against the wind, yelling "Mom" at the top of his lungs. But his voice seemed to die in the wind, nothing but an empty echo. Ilya ran and ran until he saw his mom lying in bed, asleep forever. After she died, Ilya fell in love with sleeping, with dreaming of being a kid again. In his dreams, Mom sat by his bed, singing lullabies to gently send him to sleep. Morning light, like a rusty knife, struggled through the velvet curtains, casting patchy light on the floor. Ilya curled up in the satin sheets. His oil-slicked hair stuck to his hollow cheeks. With each heavy breath, he made the dusty brass bell at his bedside hum faintly. Cobwebs in the corner trembled in the draught, like invisible hands spinning a cocoon of isolation. At 32, Ilya spent his days napping on the couch. No matter how the old valet Zahar shook or nagged, he refused to wake up. The only blessing was that his parents had left him a large estate and 350 serfs, allowing him to continue his wasteful life in St. Petersburg. One day, Zahar brought back 2 explosive pieces of news. First, the landlord was demanding rent or they would be evicted. The second was that the butcher would no longer extend credit, as they hadn't paid in 3 months. Ilya instantly sobered, recalling the manager's letter saying the harvest was poor and he'd receive 2,000 rubles less. This boy who only wanted to sleep was now finally worrying about money. So Ilya planned to write a proposal to improve the estate management, but half an hour after breakfast, he still hadn't started.
Ядовитый ты человек, что такое другой? Знаешь ли ты, что такое другой, а?
О, батюшка, томить-то меня жалкими словами.
Ну разве я другой? Да я на всю свою жизнь ни разу себе чулок на ноги не натянул.
The more Ilya scolded, the more he cried like a kid. Zahar's heart broke at the sight. He dropped everything he was doing to comfort the sobbing Ilya, who was acting like a child. He had raised Ilya since he was a child and treated him like his own son. He couldn't bear to see him so sad. From then on, Ilya could have anything he wanted, even the stars in the sky, if he asked. A gentle, pleasant numbness washed over his body. But Ilya was not truly asleep. The anxiety of having accomplished nothing overwhelmed him. Even though he had decided to be a worthless slacker, he couldn't help comparing himself to others. He simply buried his face deeper in the pillow, relying on the precious memories of his mother to get through his lazy life. A savior had arrived. He was Ilya's childhood friend and the person he trusted most. Andrei's presence was like a beam of light illuminating Ilya's dim and damp spiritual world. He hugged him tightly, just like when they were children, unwilling to let go for a single second. They were the same age, but their personalities were completely opposite. Where Ilya was lazy, Andrei was as diligent as a wind-up robot, tireless and unceasing. This was shaped by his family and upbringing. Andrei's father was German, and his mother was a fallen Russian noble. When he was young, his father always made him check accounts and pay him wages like a laborer, which annoyed Andrei's mother. Although his mother's family had fallen on hard times, she still maintained noble manners. She did not want her son to receive a mere practical education like a common laborer. After his mother died and Andrei grew up, his father gave him a sum of money and sent him out to make his own way in the world. The neighbors were shocked, thinking the foreigner had no heart, casting out his son like a stray kitten. At 18, Andrei was full of youthful pride and did not shed a single tear when saying goodbye to his father. Finally, his father told Andrei that if he really couldn't make it in the big city, he could turn to a friend of his for help. Then he urged his son to set off quickly, or he wouldn't reach Moscow before dark. Watching Andrei's lonely figure depart, the neighbors couldn't bear it anymore. They all stepped in to give the boy their blessings, as a father should have done.
Батюшка ты мой, Андрюша! Моя ненаглядный, дай-ка я тебя благословлю!
Andrei finally broke down, tears streaming down his face. But when he looked back at his father, the man had already turned away, walked back into the house, and closed the door. Yet it was this very coldness that taught Andrei to fend for himself early in life, to strive and advance in society. In the end, he achieved great success in business, becoming a model of worldly success, admired and praised by many. But Andrei wasn't heartless. He had a soft spot for Ilya, his old buddy. Andrei could not bear to see Ilya wallow in pessimism and waste his life. The man wore only a towel around his waist, rushing into the snow nearly naked as the biting winter wind pierced his skin. He shouted for his friend, urging him to join this so-called test of manhood. But no matter how he pleaded, Ilya stayed curled in the warm room, tightening his towel. Unlike Andrei, who had been self-reliant since childhood, Ilya was long accustomed to a lazy, reclusive life. Andrei refused to give up. He fetched a handful of snow, insisting his friend embrace winter's gift. He didn't expect the joke to anger Ilya. Unlike Andrei's rugged self-sufficiency, Ilya had always been the weak one, happiest doing nothing but napping on the sofa all day. To Ilya, everything in the world had purpose, even the leaves of a centuries-old tree that withered and regrew repeatedly. This childlike philosophy left Andrei both amused and concerned for his friend's wasted potential. "You must start a new life. Now or never," Andrei declared, forcing his way into Ilya's apartment. Despite protests, the harsh rehabilitation plan began. The morning alarm had barely rung when Andrei stormed in with a basin of ice water, yanking open the curtains in a near-dash sadistic wake-up routine.
Захар! Значит так. В палату по делам, потом обедать.
Ilya had no chance to sleep in. He was dressed by servants in formal wear, then seated at the table bleary-eyed for the earliest breakfast of his adult life. To his despair, Andrei dumped his beloved beef rice and replaced it with a green salad, decreeing less meat and more vegetables to shed his excess fat. Less meat and more vegetables and fruits were torture for Ilya. Before he could recover, Ilya was hauled into a carriage to meet a self-made business partner. The host fawned over Andrei but ignored Ilya, wounding his pride. In humiliation, the introverted and sensitive Ilya simply dozed off at the man's desk. The subsequent social events felt like torture, a child thrown into the adult world, alien and overwhelming. He felt like an ignorant child suddenly thrust into the adult world, everything unfamiliar and unsettling. On the carriage ride home, Ilya was exhausted. He was truly tired. Yet that night, he woke strangely alert, sneaking to old servant Zahar's room with a lamp to steal snacks. Just as he started eating, a demonic face appeared in the door's peephole, terrifying Zahar. Andrei had caught him red-handed, having discovered his friend's secret somehow.
Ужель ты хочешь опять походить на дряблый, ветхий, изношенный кафтан? Ну, послушай, Илья, ну вот что проку, что ты теперь наешься и бухнешься спать вот с таким вот брюхом? День-денской, спи, пей, хочешь?
Andrei's roar froze Ilya in place, but when he threatened to tie a pig to his bed, Ilya smiled happily. It was as if he saw countless delicious roasts flying toward him. That childlike smile instantly deflated Andrei's anger. He truly couldn't stay mad at Ilya. Eventually, the man who'd stuck to a strict routine for years ended up sharing the greasy midnight snack, muttering, "This is the last time." Their friendship was a miracle, like the eighth wonder of the world. One as fierce as a wolf, the other as laid back as a cat, yet bound by deep affection despite their extremes. Under Andrei's pressure, Ilya's life stabilized, but he still loathed fake socializing. To him, fake pleasantries and idle hours over cards or tea were no different from napping in bed, weren't they? That changed when Andrei introduced Olga, a beautiful girl, to him. Beside the fairy-like, confident Olga, the already insecure Ilya shrank into the shadows, too ashamed to meet her gaze. No matter how Andrei urged him, he couldn't speak properly. Andrei had to escort Olga back to the banquet hall, leaving Ilya alone in the empty corner. But soon, the trio often played in the snow, and Ilya grew more cheerful with their company. Yet their happiness was short-lived. Andrei had to go on a business trip to Europe for work. Before leaving, he begged Olga to continue his rehabilitation plan, especially to urge Ilya to finish his estate management plan. Otherwise, the prodigal heir would go bankrupt and end up a street vagrant. Olga was confident. She'd long planned to make Ilya read newspapers and draft farm improvement plans. In short, when Andrei saw Ilya again, he'd be impressed. After Andrei left, Ilya moved out of the apartment as he'd asked and rented a villa near Olga's home. From then on, he woke early every day to bring books to Olga, walking, reading, and enjoying the beautiful spring together. Unknowingly, Ilya fell for the beautiful, kind girl. Though Andrei kept writing to urge him to join him in Europe, Ilya delayed, reluctant to leave Olga. But Olga grew odd, constantly angry at Ilya, even pointing to a nearby grove and saying it blocked the view and was annoying. Ilya was confused, but to please her, he put down his book and cleared the bushes himself. If old servant Zahar had been there, he would have wept for the young master's growth and kissed his forehead in excitement. Yet his humility earned no response. Olga stood him up. The joy that had lit his face vanished instantly. The field was filled with birds chirping, flowers blooming, and trees shading, with occasional insect sounds. Gazing at the beautiful scenery, Ilya drifted off again. In a haze, he returned to childhood summers. Servants napping under trees, his father and friends telling jokes in the parlor, and Ilya safe in his mother's arms. Back then, he'd always begged his mother to stay a little longer, never imagining she'd leave so soon. Ilya nestled in his mother's arms, sleeping soundly and carefree. But the scene cut to his mother lying lifeless in bed the next moment. Even in his sleep, Ilya was consumed by sorrow, 2 tears welling up and sliding from his lashes to his cheeks. Trapped in a nightmare, he wasn't jolted awake until Olga's angry shout. Ilya groggily woke up, eager to tell the girl about his dream. But Olga stormed off in anger before he could speak. He hurried after her, but Olga skidded to a halt, spinning around to demand, "What would you do if I got sick and died?" Panic seized Ilya. He hadn't spared a thought for death since his mother passed when he was 5. Reacting on childlike instinct, he petulantly snapped, "I'd shoot myself so you'd get better." Seeing the infantile innocence in his eyes, Olga realized he had no clue why she was angry, or why she'd asked the question. Olga decided to lay her feelings bare. But Ilya understood love even less than he did death. Clueless how to handle her confession, he fled like a coward. Watching him disappear, Olga felt heartbroken yet drawn to his childlike simplicity. Wandering the forest aimlessly, he stumbled on a moving caravan. It was the Baron, an aunt's guest.
Ну, с Богом. А где Ольга? Барон сделал Ольге предложение. Она ему решительно отказала. Катя!
Он ей предложение?
Fury hit Ilya. How dare that lecher propose to Olga? He chased the carriage like a madman, screaming for a duel. Predictably, he returned home cursing, rage blazing so hot he wanted to destroy the world. Poor Zahar bore the brunt again.
Что ж так волноваться, Илья Ильич? Не надо так волноваться. Ведь барону она отказала, да и бог с ним. Часами сказали, что она вас любит. Сама сказала, что любит. Ну вот.
Late to the realization, Ilya smiled at her forced confession, then recoiled at his mirror reflection, haggard, ugly, spineless. A girl like Olga deserved the best, and he wasn't it. Andrei was different, charming, sharp, a master of men and money. Ilya finally steeled himself and wrote her a letter that night, explaining they couldn't be together. Their love was blind, he said, fragile against reality. Soon she'd see he wasn't her dream man, and Andrei was. But Ilya was wrong. She and Andrei were just friends, he was the one she loved. But his insecurities had ruined it all. Foolishly, he thought sacrificing himself would make her happy. Olga wept after reading his breakup letter. She raged at his arrogance before storming off in tears. Now lucid, Ilya realized the letter was less about pain than his smug sense of sacrifice. He thought he could bear losing her, but now knew he couldn't. By fate, they met again at the pavilion. A storm erupted then, thunder crashing, lightning splitting the sky. Using the storm as an excuse, Olga pulled him close. His hesitation melted in her fiery embrace. After she left, Ilya sat in the pavilion all night, feeling a relief he'd never known, as if a weight had lifted. At dawn, sunlight filtered through the trees, casting shadows and golden flecks on leaves. Ilya woke in the beauty and walked toward her. They chatted through the window, unaware of the world, until her aunt called her away. Ilya finally headed home. Before bed, he told the servant to deliver a letter inviting her to the pavilion. She didn't show, citing guests. Hiding in the bushes, he watched the party and saw a different Olga, laughing, charming everyone, unstoppable. To his dismay, every man she talked to outshone him in looks, in wit, in poise. Insecurity crept back. Making up an illness, he declined her fireworks invitation, retreating into his shell like a turtle. The next day, Olga visited him. Thrilled, he thought she'd come for him only to learn Andrei was back from Europe, and she left quickly. The next morning, Andrei arrived at Ilya's villa. They hugged excitedly, pouring out 3 months of longing. Andrei also brought European gadgets and invited them to try them, but Ilya declined. Watching them lose themselves in fun, he suddenly knew he didn't belong, and never would. Ilya decided then and there, running to join their bike game. Soon after, he moved away, drifting from Andrei and Olga until they were strangers. A year after he left, Olga married Andrei. 7 years later, Ilya died of a stroke from poor habits. His loyal servant now a beggar and drunk. One day, while working, Andrei heard a sound and looked out. Through a daze, he saw a vast wilderness where a boy ran screaming for his mother.